Have you hit that moment in your life when you recognize that, sure, you could probably have anything? Like, really, if you set your mind to it, you have access to so much in your life. And yet, you're not going to have everything. Yeah, that's a big letdown. And I know if you are anything like myself, that was a pretty sobering moment when you realize that you had all of these hopes and dreams, many, many, many of them. But there does come a point in your life where you recognize there are not enough hours in the day and there are not enough days left on this planet that you're going to be able to accomplish all of it. So then what? Now is the time where we really need to start to double down on what it is that brings us happiness. But how do you figure that out? I mean, there are so many mixed messages on this idea of what brings joy. How do you follow your heart? What do you mean by that, Dr. Natalie? Well, that's really what we're going to close out this month with is how do I really know what it is that I want from life? And how do I handle this sobering information that while I could probably have anything I want, I can't have everything that I want.
I know your deep, dark secret. You don't like your life. You're a woman in midlife, and for the past 2 decades or more, you've poured yourself in to other people. You've poured yourself into your career, your family, and yet on the inside, you feel broken. And that's no way to be. I'm Dr. Natalie Marr. I'm a clinical psychologist and a life transition expert. It wasn't too long ago that I was in your shoes, waking up in my early 40s, thinking I've got 2 failed marriages and I'm a single mom for the second time in my life. And I just knew that I could do better, that I could feel better. Fortunately for you, I have about 20 years experience clinically. And so I've created a method that will help you learn to love your story. I know that the story that you're telling yourself about your life feels awful. And I know that you think that you can't change that. I assure you, you can. And when we work together, I'm going to help you to craft a different story, a story that you love, a story that makes you want to get up every single day.
Welcome back. So today we're going to round out this month's series on how to go after those big dreams, because I still want you to go after those big dreams, ladies. But I think that one of the things sitting across the couch from people for thousands of hours that I've really figured out is that there is this moment when we finally recognize while we want all of these things, we're not likely going to be able to have all these things. And it isn't for a lack of dreaming, and it isn't for a lack of competence or wanting any of those things. It really is just about there's a finite resource here, and that resource is you. And she is not going to be able to do all the things. She can do many, many, many things, but she won't be able to accomplish all the things. So what do you want her to accomplish, right? And I know that peppered throughout this whole month, I've also been talking about how we're always up against this lack of knowledge of what it is that we want, because we've been so socially conditioned to know what it is that everybody else wants from us or of us or with us or whatever. But it isn't a skill set yet that we've been taught to really dial into what it is that we want. Where does our heart take us? I would even say that a lot of us have been culturally conditioned to not listen to that, to second guess the what it is that I want. What are the things that I know that my heart would guide me towards, but that your heart might not guide you towards? I think that we're socially conditioned basically to deny what it is that is the best thing for us. We've been socially conditioned rather to be really great human givers. It's that human giver syndrome idea that I've talked about before from Dr. Emily and Dr. Amelia Nagowski's book on burnout. all about, women, we're human givers. We've been given this edict and we follow through with it. We're the good little girl. We're the good big girl. We're the dutiful wives and mothers. We're the, best person to be on your team at work because we're loyal and we follow through. I mean, there's a lot of great qualities that have come from that. But one of the drawbacks is that we've been given this great superpower of understanding what others' needs are, but we haven't been nurturing our knowledge of ourselves and our knowledge of what we need. And that's really one of these missing pieces, I think, that it just shows up at this point in talking about living our big dreams. I would be amiss if I wasn't going to go after why we want to do this. Now, I'm going to remind you, there is a link in the notes to a really wonderful worksheet on how, not a worksheet, it's actually a workbook on how to really get at, what's getting in the way of you building your own dream, not just what's in the way of you getting into your own dreams, but also how you can start this path, how you can start to manifest the dreams and build the life or design the life that you've always wanted for yourself. And I am willing to bet, ladies, that one of the biggest barriers is yourself. I wish it wasn't. It so is. And I know for sure it's been something that's been a bit of an evolution in my own life. So I'll share a little bit about my own story here. I mean, I have talked a little bit off and on in the podcast that Learn to Love Your Story has been a little passion project of mine, started, around the beginning of COVID. And honestly, I didn't know where I was going with this when I first started. I had no idea. But I was using many of the principles that I've been teaching this month, following that kind of, that's the next right thing principle that I talk about in my online courses. It's this idea of, I have a dream. I kind of know what it should look like on the other side, but you know what it is? I don't really know what it's going to look like. I know how I'm going to feel when I'm there. And that's what I really anchor back to most of the time, is this idea of when I've accomplished educating women and have enough platforms where I feel satisfied that women are getting this information in a way that they need it and can access it and can use it, I am going to feel like $1,000,000. And it certainly has guided every next right step of this process, because I'll feel like, oh yeah, I did this thing. I put these online courses out there. And then when I realized that people aren't accessing those, it wasn't that I didn't make the information, but how do I get it out there? Well, then I started looking at marketing stuff. And after I did that, it was like, oh my gosh, people need whole groups of other women that are doing this with them, because that really lifts them up. So then I added group coaching. There was this whole process of adding the next right thing as I was bringing this to fruition. But what has told me that I'm on the right track has always been my gut, has always been me going back in and checking in with myself and asking myself, does this feel right? Is this what I've been trying to accomplish? Is this what I want women to have? Is it enough? Do I feel like I've saturated what I can do here? Or is there more that I could be doing? So the information I'm teaching, very similar. I mean, if you've listened to my podcast, you've heard that. If you've read my blogs, you've read that. If you've been in my group coaching, you've heard that. So, and remember, I still have free group coaching. So please access all of those different ways of getting this information. Make sure that I'm meeting your needs by meeting you where you're at. Some of us like to read. Some of us like to pop this podcast on as we're driving to and from work or commuting, to pick up and drop off kids or whatever else that we do in our lives. And I want to make sure that you get this information. The information I've already known. I've known it for a long time. And so my next right thing principle has really been about guiding me about, how do I feel like it's landing? Am I doing enough? And then doing the next right step of that right in front of me. And I learned this, of course, through the hard knocks of life, because that's just really where this information comes from. And I started to teach about it after I had learned it in my hard knocks. And I have learned it and I've relearned it multiple times in the hard knocks of my life. So you may be very similar to me. You may be, a divorcee, and you understand there is literally no way to get through a divorce without feeling like you've gone through some sort of financial ruin. because it is like, it's just devastating. It certainly is not part of the American dream, right? Like, nowhere in that social and cultural conditioning are we given this idea that like you should have this little nest egg on the side in case this relationship doesn't work out. No, you're supposed to like financially entangle and do all the things. And I did that in my first marriage. I did it in my second marriage. And so I have had multiple experiences of coming out the other end of things, just financially devastating and having to build from the ground up. And, in the middle of those liminal spaces where you're not meeting the needs of the social, cultural programming and conditioning, you're really like faced with this idea of, is this my dream? Is this really my dream, or was this somebody else's dream for me? And I think that in both occasions, when I've gone through both of those, when I've, had to move and relocate with my kid and, start over financially, I've learned that oftentimes if I'm in my head about where I should be, I get caught up in the programming and conditioning, and I don't make the best decisions for myself as far as how to come out the other side of that. If I'm just trying to move out again and get started over and look like the Joneses next door to me, except that I don't have a partner with me, so it's just me, the Jones I don't know. Anyway, if I'm all caught in my head about what it looks like, do I look like what I'm supposed to be doing? Does it look like to other people what I'm supposed to be doing? I get stuck. Right? I think I can do it all and I want to do it all. And I'm forcing myself like with this shoehorn to fit into something that I don't fit into. I'm looking to look good, not feel good. And so it was in these moments, these liminal spaces, that I really started to learn how to check in with myself. Like, does this feel right? And I can tell you that this most recent iteration of this, so my second divorce, moving into the place with my little one, my son deciding he wanted to go live with his dad, it was a new configuration. And so I was looking at a new, smaller place and things like that. I was a good year after that. And I, had been doing overworking. I've talked about that in blogs and things too. I'd been doing a lot of overworking as my favorite choice of numbing agent. Not an alcoholic. I don't overshop. Those aren't things that I do, but I love to overwork. So that's how I was choosing to numb myself out during my divorce and all the pain and things that go with that adjustment. But it was about a year after I was starting to settle in, and I really recognized like this didn't feel right. And I had honed that skill over time, like how to check in with yourself. And again, these are all things that I teach in my online courses. So self-awareness, compassionate self-awareness, I'm using all of that. I'm looking at like, am I making the right self-empowered decision here? I don't think I am. Because what happened was I had paid off debts, and I had, paid off friends that had helped me to get into the place that I'm in and get a new car after a divorce and all those things. Because let me just tell you, folks, your credit score goes down. You don't have the stores that you once thought you were going to have. Like it's hard, and I know it's hard. And I'm a privileged person with a doctorate and a great business, so I am not asking anybody to cry me a river with this. All I'm saying is it is difficult even for those of us with resources. So I was sitting here like a year out from that, maybe a little bit more, in a better place after I'd paid back a lot of that stuff. And I was saying to myself, this still doesn't feel right to me. Like, I don't feel like I'm in alignment with this dream that I have for myself. I'm not sure why. So I'm going to stay curious about that. But I know that the working thing isn't going to work for me. Like, it helped me to pay off these debts. I've got myself kind of in a better space now. I'm good about that. I'm happy with that. But I still wasn't feeling in alignment. And I really didn't know what it was that I was supposed to be working towards. And here is where I think that many of us find ourselves. Like, we know that we could do anything, but we are realizing we can't do everything. And we're figuring out for ourselves that the thing that we've decided to line ourselves up with is not the thing. That's a hard place to be, my friends. Like, one of my specialities in therapy, when I do clinical therapy with clients, is grief therapy work. And grief is a huge, huge thing. It's much bigger than I think what we've been kind of acculturated to believe it is. Like it's the loss of people, and then you grieve that and there's stages and you're done, right, Dr. Natalie? Nope. I could do an entire series, and maybe will someday, on the grief whole subject matter. But I can tell you that that's what you're up against when you recognize A, I can't do everything, and B, I think the thing that I saddled myself to is not my thing. And that feels kind of gross because, oh my gosh, I can't do everything because I don't have all the time. And you're telling me that I just saddled myself doing a thing I don't want to be doing. Does anybody hear me here? I bet you've been here. I've met many people who have been here, and it's a hard place to be. You're like, what you're saying to me right now, Dr. Natalie, is I have done the wrong thing this whole time, that I saddled myself with the wrong goal, that I've come to the end of something. Maybe I've even killed it. Like I am really good at what I'm doing here, and it isn't my thing. That's what you're trying to tell me? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to tell you. And it's a hard place to be. You can feel really yucky about that. And there's a lot of grieving that you need to do when you have to just finally draw a line in the sand and say, yeah, this isn't going to work for me. This is not the life that I want for myself. I'm going to have to start over almost down a whole different path. But the way that we figure that out is when it doesn't feel right. When we've been in our heads and attaching ourselves with what we think it should look like, what other people have told us it should look like, but we arrive kind of, or we're at the place where we should be kind of taking an assessment saying, hey, is this working out? Does this feel good? We realize, it feels meh. For some of us, it doesn't feel terrible. We're doing things well, but it doesn't feel like it's for us. Once you've got some really good skill sets with being able to check in with yourself, and you've made it a point to actually do that checking in, you're going to start to find an answer that you don't always like, which is, yeah, this isn't for you. So, that whole journey of being married and having a big family and a huge house and entertaining and all those ideas that you had for yourself, Natalie, yeah, that isn't your life. and each time you went to the altar of trying to make that happen, fantastically, sometimes, my friends, that shit blew up in my face. So I know now that's not for me. But even when I course adjusted and I came into this place and I had my wits about me and I was thinking about this a little bit differently, once I got stable again, I realized, this is not working for me. And I would say, if you haven't listened to last week's podcast, pop back and listen to that one too, because I would say even a year ago today, I still had not completely grasped where it was that I needed to be going. But last year I took some time off and I did some things right. And I set out a plan for myself that was way more attached to the way I would feel. So I was going to need to reduce hours with my clinical practice because I needed to feel differently. I was headed down a burnout place because I was working at a pace that was just beyond what I needed to be working at post-COVID. COVID was hard on all of us. Still, actually, there's a lot of residual effect from it that's still hard on a lot of us. And I put in my dues as a mental health professional with lots of my clients through that. And I'm at a place right now where I get to choose differently and they get to choose differently. We're going to be able to help them out, right? So last year when I sat down and did that assessment of myself, that was part of my consideration, is just, I don't feel in it like I was when I started this practice. And so I need to modify that practice, which means reducing a lot of the hours I put towards the practice, because I think there's other ways and other skill sets I need to tap into, like my writing, like the podcast, like speaking, basically, because I can articulate some of this stuff in ways that people understand it. It's a gift I was given. I'm not going to pretend like it isn't a gift that I put a ton of effort behind being able to do, but it is something that I do well, and it is something that's needed. And so I needed to course adjust and fix how I was doing that. And this, what I'm doing right now today, right in front of you, feels more in alignment. I can feel it, that I'm in a path that's better aligned with where I need to be. So doesn't mean what I've done or what I was hitched to was something that I shouldn't have been hitched to when I was hitched to it. It just means that there was a shelf life to that. And that's where I was hitting. I was hitting that point where it felt meh, didn't feel right. I might have even been heading towards burnout, and I needed to course adjust to be able to bring this back to a place that worked better for me. So again, it all comes back to this idea of I can do all that. I could have stayed on that path with my clinical practice. I still have a clinical practice, my friends. I just don't have it to the level that I once did. And I knew I could do that, but I can't do everything. And when I reassessed, I realized there's some other things that needed attention from me and that I needed to try. I needed to give a go at that. If I hadn't taken those risky steps of, setting aside hours towards, even though they weren't bringing in money for me, but making sure that you had this podcast in front of you, making sure that I had more blogs, making sure that I started my book, all of those things feel right for me as far as my goals and my dreams. And I needed to take those risks, and I wasn't going to do that if I was trying to do everything. If I was trying to feed my old style of business, the old configuration of my business, and do these things, there just weren't enough hours in the day. And I was going to have to take a look at that, redo things. And I'm hoping this has inspired you in some way to take a look at and redo things in your life. It doesn't have to be a grieving process that's like, burn it all and run away and start over. That's not what it looked like for me. I mean, in a lot of ways, it was a stepwise process that took more than a year to put some of this stuff into action for me. But on my Learn to Love Your Story journey, it's been really important for me to stay true to checking in and making sure that what I'm doing feels right. Like it feels like it's part of whatever this goal is that I have for myself. Sometimes I can see it. Sometimes I can say the step today is a step that's part of this whole journey of steps that will get to this end dream for me that will look a certain way. Sometimes it does look like that, or it feels and looks like that. But sometimes the better way to check in is really just, how does it feel? Does it feel like it's part of that? Because if in any way it feels meh, or like it's killing you, or like if I have to do another one of these things, I'm just going to die. I can't put my energy towards that anymore, but I don't know how to get out of it. Well, there you are. You need to set some new dreams for yourself, and the dreams and the things you're doing towards those dreams need to feel anchored in a way that's in alignment with that new place. I know you might not have all the answers of, how do I do this and not pay my bills? How do I do this and not blah, blah, blah? You have a lot of reasons why you shouldn't be doing it. Go back through this month, re-listen to all these podcasts. I give you ideas on how to use even those naysaying parts of yourself as part of your journey, as part of the steps towards finding your dreams and living and creating a life that you've dreamed to live. But I do know that if it doesn't feel right, you are serving the wrong thing. So one of my very favorite ways of teaching this in my coaching, in any place, so here I am teaching it to you on the podcast, is to use this old Cherokee legend. And so many of you might have heard this. It's kind of a parable, a Cherokee parable or story that talks to this idea of mindfulness and how we use this in our daily life. But I'm going to share it with you here. I'll put a link in the notes as well, because I think that it's a really great way for us to just envision this and know what I am trying to teach you here about, like checking in with your feeling and making sure that you're aligning yourself with the very things that are in alignment with your end goal dream. And that's this Cherokee. So I'll share it with you here. An old grandfather is speaking to his grandson about what causes the violence and cruelty in the world. In each human heart, he tells the boy, there are two wolves battling one another. One is fearful and angry, and the other is understanding and kind. The young boy then asks, which one will win? His grandfather smiles and says, whichever one we choose to feed. And that's how I want you to think about it in this two wolves parable idea, that when we feed a dream that isn't ours, but one that's been set for us, it really can lead to a lot of our angst, to a lot of the problems that we experience along the way, and certainly to feeling dissatisfied, meh, stuck, any of those different adjectives when we really are like we've arrived, we've been able to meet that goal, but we're just not feeling satisfied, joyful, happy, content in our lives. So if that's where you're finding yourselves, ladies, this month, I have given you all kinds of ways to take a compass and get on your way towards living your dreams. Start designing the life that you want to be living in. I've given you those tools and I hope that you use them. I hope you go to the notes. I hope you've downloaded that workbook. That's a great starting point. My online courses, a great place for you to look at ways to, get into the behaviors and skills that you need to have in order to take on this journey. Join my group coaching, join my membership. There is a way for you to have the resources you need to find that life that you've always wanted for yourself. And this is a way to do it. And this two wolves parable is just a way for you to frame it for yourself when you're checking in with that feeling. Am I feeding the wolf that's bringing me angst and destruction and pain and dissatisfaction and feeling stuck? Or am I feeling that kind and understanding part of me that knows that the next right step is this, in alignment with a dream that I want for myself? Even if it feels risky, even if feeding it feels a little risky. This is why I like it that it's two wolves. This is not two bunnies. Like sometimes it feels a little risky to feed any wolf whatsoever, but I do want you to feed this wolf that is here for you. She is going to be the one that guides you. Here's the other thing I like about the wolf analogy. When a leading wolf is leading, it's at the back of the pack. It's actually the wolf at the back of the pack that's watching the vulnerable parts of our pack, that's watching that the pack is going in the right direction and is guiding from that behind position. Now, I am certainly not a zoologist and cannot tell you all of the pieces that go into who's in what places in the pack, because I know that it's bookended and there is another leadership position at the front. But there is a part of that pack that one of the stronger animals is in the back, and they are guiding this pack and the children and the elderly and all the ones that are a little bit more vulnerable, like mothers that are carrying children, things of that nature. They want to have somebody in the back end. And I think that's how this will feel. You won't always know where you're going. You don't always have like this solid picture of what step 1, 2, 3 through 20 is going to be. But you do have a feeling of, am I in the right place at the right time? You do have the ways of checking in your body mind and knowing that you're in alignment with something that you want for yourself. Because if you're not in alignment with it, it won't feel right. And if you're listening to your gut, it will be able to guide you with that. And that's what this two wolves parable can help you with as well. So all of that will be in the notes along with my workbook. Make sure that you've listened to all of this series, because it really has been a whole set of skills that you could manifest any dream with. I promise you, I've laid it all out for you. The science backs all of it. I don't teach things that don't have scientific efficacy. You know that about me. I'm a nerd. And just so you know what will be coming up in the next month or so, I do have a few more little podcasts here and there that I've recorded, but what I've put together is a whole group of recordings where I've interviewed other women, other entrepreneurs, other women who are doing things that are, adjacent to the things I do or augment some of the things that I do and share with you guys. I'm going to be spending some time in the summer doing some traveling. And so I wanted to kind of preemptively create just a wonderful group of teachings that could be really useful to you. So I will be doling those out through the month of June. all of them are consistent with all of the things I teach in my online courses and my blogs and on these podcasts. So it's going to be just some wonderful, fun things for you to listen to throughout the summer. And I also am doing my free coaching in the summer, but a little bit differently. So if you haven't been paying attention to any of the stuff that's been coming out in the emails or on my website, you'll want to make sure that you're paying attention to that too if you're part of that group, because I won't be meeting in the month of July, but we will be meeting in June and we'll be meeting again in August. And there'll be more details on that to be feathered out later. But I hope that you've enjoyed this series, because I definitely know that this series is a key element in you learning to love your story. All right, so I'm adding a little addition here. It's the legal stuff. Just so you're aware, nothing in any of these podcasts constitutes actual psychotherapy. Yes, I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, but everything here is just educational in nature and is a suggestion of things that you could be doing in your own life to learn how to love the life that you're in instead of waiting for a life that you're dreaming of to come towards you. So just remember, this is not therapy. And if ever you need any resources for mental health, look in my notes and I'll always have a little blurb at the bottom where you can click on a link and get those services for yourself.